Hello, welcome. In this video, we are going to go through lesson 10.2, which is all about circles. Now, circles might seem like a geometry concept, but the way that we're going to approach circles today is by looking at the equation, which is algebraic in nature. Our goal today would be to write an equation for a circle, as well as, if given the equation, can we find the center and the radius. So to start, just to remember what a circle is, you can probably picture a circle in your head, but the definition of a circle is this is a set of points equal distance from a center point. So a circle is kind of defined by two things. One, the center of the circle. And we're going to think of the center as the point H, K. We just pick those letters to represent the center. H is the X coordinate, K is the Y coordinate of the center of the circle. The other thing is the distance to the center. That's what we call the radius. So we know that a circle has a consistent radius. Each point is the same distance from the center point, and that distance is called the radius. This is our general equation for a circle. And really in this equation, there's going to be three numbers that we're looking for. So H and K. We know that H and K are the center. So both H and K come from the center of the circle. And then our R value, that's going to be our radius. So we should be able to write this equation if we're given the center and the radius, and we should be able to work backwards if we're given the equation to find the center and the radius. In example 1, we're going to take a look at writing an equation. Now, to write an equation, we need two things. We need the center and we need the radius. So the center, here we're given the point -3, 4. So that's going to give me my H and K values. And then the radius is going to be our R value. So I'm going to take those and plug into my equation. So I'll start with X minus H. Now, we're subtracting the H value, and the H value is -3. If I was subtracting -3, subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding 3. And the way that I always say that is our center is just opposite. If this is a -3, our adding the X value. And if this is a +4, we should be subtracting it. So I would just say that the center is opposite what we have in the equation. So this minus K, again, if it's minus K, that would be -4. Even though this is a +4, we write the opposite. So -3 becomes +3 and +4 becomes -4. And that's equal to our radius squared, which our radius is 6. So if we do 6 squared, that would be 36. We do want to make sure that we're plugging in 6 squared, not just 6. And we don't want to leave it as 6 squared. We want to simplify and write that as 36. Let's try another one. The center is 0, 8. So H is 0 and K is 8. And then this is our diameter. Now we do want to be careful about that. If you remember, a diameter is all the way across the circle. So to find the radius, we would need to take half of the diameter. So I'm going to take half of the diameter. If the diameter is 12, that means the radius is 6. And we'll set up our equation. So I'll do X. 0 is neither positive or negative, so we could just write -0 squared. Plus, and then we'll do Y minus K. Again, since the 8 is positive, I'm going to make sure that's opposite. So that's -8 squared. Equals R squared. R was 6, so if we do 6 squared, again, that would be 36. All right, now C is a little bit different. We are still given the center, so we're given the points H and K. But we're just told another point on the circle. This isn't the radius, but it could help us find the radius. When you're given another point like this, I'm going to think of this as X and Y. And so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to rewrite that equation, and then we're going to see if we can follow kind of where we're plugging things in to this equation. So we do have our center H and K, but I'm going to use these points as my X and Y value. So I'm actually going to plug in for X. I'm going to plug 5 in for X. And then remember, H and K are opposite. If this is -4, I'm going to write +4. Plus, and then my Y value, I'm going to use -1. That is not opposite, only the H and K are opposite. If this is +11, I'm going to write -11. And that's going to be equal to r squared. Now, we should be able to type this whole thing on our calculator. These are just numbers. So we should be able to type in those numbers and get an r squared value. So I'm going to type in just like I see, 5 plus 4 squared, plus in parentheses -1 minus 11 squared. And that's going to give me my r squared value. Now, technically we could take the square root of this to find the radius, but I don't really need that since I'm plugging into this equation, which has r squared. So then I'm going to just use that to write my equation. So to write my equation, again, we're going to do x, and we're going to plug in our center. This is -4, so I'll do the opposite, which is +4. Plus y, 11 is positive, so I'll do the opposite, squared, and that's equal to r squared, which we found was 225. So that would be my equation. So if you don't have r squared, you can work backwards just by plugging in that point as your x and y value and solving on your calculator. All right, in example 2, we're going to do the opposite. Here we're asked to identify the center and the radius from our equation. So again, we're going to look for those h and k values in the parentheses to find our center, and then our radius is going to be what it's equal to. So h and k are what's in parentheses, and remember, these are opposite. It's always opposite. So if this is +2, I'm going to write -2. If this looks like -4, I'm going to write +4. That would be my center. Now, remember, this is r squared. So if I want to find just my radius, I would need to take the square root of that. So I'd have to take the square root of 81. The square root of 81 is 9. So that would be my radius. So this number isn't your radius, it's the radius squared. In B, a little bit different. Here, I don't have a number next to x. So I really don't have an h value. If that happens, my h value is really just going to be 0. Same thing with the y. I don't have a number next to y. So my k value would also just be 0. This, remember, is r squared, so we're going to need to find the square root of 20. Now, if I take the square root of 20, that's going to give me a decimal, and I don't want a decimal, so we can just leave that as the square root of 20. We don't have to do anything with that. We don't have to simplify that. We'll just go ahead and leave that as the square root of 20. All right, if you flip, the last thing we're going to take a look at is some graphs of circles. So in example 3, we're asked to write the equation of the circle graphed below. Again, if you remember your equation, this is our equation. And for this, we need to know the center and we need to know the radius. So on my graph, I'm going to want to find the center and I'm going to want to find the radius. The center is the point in the middle of the circle. So this is a coordinate. I can see this would be the point -1, 1, 2, 3. So this would be the point -1, 3. And for the radius, I can see for the radius, this would be 1, 2, 3, 4 units. So the radius is the distance from the center to the outside. It doesn't really matter which point you count. If I counted backwards 1, 2, 3, 4, or if I counted up 1, 2, 3, 4. Either way, the radius should be the same. So I can see that the radius is 4 units. So I'm going to take that information and plug it into my equation. So I'll do x minus h. H is -1, so I'll do the opposite, which is +1 squared, plus y minus k. K is +3, so I'll write -3 squared. And then r squared, r is 4, so if we do 4 squared, that would be 16. And that would give me my equation. All right, last example is we're going to create a graph. And again, to create a graph, we need those two pieces of information. So the center and the radius. The center is the point HK. H, there isn't really an H value, so we're going to say 0 since there's not a number next to X. K will be the opposite. If this is +6, K should be -6. And this is r squared, so again, if we wanted to find r, we would take the square root. The square root of 16 is 4. I'll go ahead and create my graph. I'm going to start my graph by plotting the center. So I'm going to plot the point 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 0, -6. And then the radius is 4. So to create my graph, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go 4 each direction from my center. So I'm going to go 4 up and 4 down and 4 left and 4 right. And I'm going to plot a point at each of those spots. So I'm going to count up 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to count left 1, 2, 3, 4. Down 1, 2, 3, 4. And right 1, 2, 3, 4. That's kind of giving me these 4 marker points that I can then use to draw my circle. Now, I know that circles can be a challenging shape to draw. Just do your best with this. Don't play connect the dots and don't make a square or a diamond. Please do your best to try to make them curved. It's okay if it's not a perfect circle. Obviously, it's hard to draw, so just do your best to connect those to make a circle. All right, the last thing we're asked for is the domain and the range. If you remember, domain is your x values, or left and right, and range is your y values, or up and down. Now, technically, there's infinite points that make up this circle. So the way that I'm going to describe my domain is what's the furthest to the left and the furthest to the right. This graph goes. If I think about the furthest to the left is at -4. And if I think about the furthest to the right is at +4. So I have infinite points in between -4 and +4. The way that we write that is we typically use an inequality notation that looks something like this, where we're using less than or equal to symbols, x is in the middle. And we put our lowest value on the left and our highest value on the right. And this essentially means we have any x value between -4 and +4. So any x value between -4 and +4. Range is up and down, or y value. So again, I want to find the lowest it goes, be at -10, and the highest it goes, which would be at -2. So again, we have infinite points in between -10 and -2. So again, I'm going to use inequality notation. It will look the same, except I'll put a y in the middle. And then I'll put my lowest value, which is -10, and my highest value, which is -2.